And next up on Man vs Pixels, I've been playing Shadow Warrior 2. Shadow Warrior 2 came out in 2016, developed by Flying Wild Hog, published by Devolver Digital. It's a first-person action shooter, looter shooter sort of game. It's currently 75% off as of making this video, but its full price is $34.99. But I think when I bought it quite a while ago, it was in a sale too, so it's one of those ones that probably cops up in a sale quite a lot. And at 75% off, you can pick it up for, you know, like £6 or something. So that's a good deal. I've completed it, beat the main story and most of the side quests. In total, 21 hours game played. So let's get into it. You play the character of Lo Wang, and yes, that's a good joke name, and they use that. they don't skimp on the Wang jokes in this game. Lo Wang is a wisecracking, crude, sort of Deadpool-esque character, always making jokes and has some pretty good voice lines and some not so good voice lines, which you'll probably get tired of all of them by the end of it, but they're a good laugh to start with. So the combat's a mixture of shooting and melee. There's quite a few weapons of both types, and you get to carry like 9, I think, in total, or 8. So you can carry a good mixture of melee and guns. The melee combat is pretty simple. It's just like an attack, a charged attack, and then like a parry and a dash. I found myself not using the parry at all, just using like dash to avoid attacks, and then just going in for hacks and whacks and the odd charge attack. The shooting is sort of standard shooting, pretty solid. The usual sort of weapons, pistols, SMGs, ARs, rocket launchers, that sort of thing. Various different enemies, all doing various different types of attack with different vulnerabilities, weaknesses and toughness. The combat loop is pretty satisfying. Most of it revolves around you going into an area where there's a ton of enemies in the world, having a big fight and moving on to the next area. So that's good. It's good combat. You get a lot of gems to upgrade your weapons. Each weapon's got like 3 gem slots, and gems drop off all your fallen enemies. They can do a lot of different things, a lot of different types of upgrades. The ones I found them using the most were gems that transform some of your damage into different elemental damages. So there's gems that will transform damage into ice or fire or poison or electricity. And like when you look at your enemies, when you're pointing at them, it will tell you if they're vulnerable to a certain type or if they're resistant to a certain type. So having a selection of your weapons imbued with the various different elemental damages is pretty good, pretty essential, because when you find yourself having to swap between them, if you see an enemy that's like resistant to fire but vulnerable to electricity, you don't want to be using your fire weapon against them. You want to switch to either a neutral weapon that hasn't got any elemental damage, or preferably a weapon that's got the damage that the enemy is vulnerable to. So there's a few things to think about like that. There's also a lot of other upgrades, upgrades to crit chance, upgrades to crit damage, upgrade damage for large enemies, area of effect, and for like the guns there's fire rate, clip size, that sort of thing. So you can think about how you want to upgrade each weapon, sort of, and then have a selection of weapons in your inventory to deal with most situations. The environments are mostly like quite large maps and open. There's not too much sort of close quarters. There's no sort of corridor combat or anything like that, and it's mostly even the indoor sections are sort of fairly big indoor arenas. You kind of teleport to each location for the beginning of each mission. So it's not an open world to explore. You sort of go between your hub, and when you start a mission, you just teleport there. Sometimes the mission maps seem a bit too large for what's actually in them, and they are repeated quite a lot as well as you go through the game. So you do get to see the same environments, if not the actual same maps, several times. So that's a bit of a downside, but yeah, you know, there's enough variety to keep it fairly fresh until you've seen the same one a couple of times anyway. So yeah, you start off you go between your hub and the mission locations. The hub is where you can talk to NPCs, the story NPCs, the side quest NPCs, and a bounty board where you can pick up bounties. These are just like one-off missions where you go there, fight a load of enemies, kill the bounty, and then come back. The hub also has shops, 2 stores where you can buy gems, weapons, and sell stuff you don't want as well. The gems you picked up you don't want. I found there wasn't usually anything that great in the stores. Occasionally they come up with a weapon. It's like I think the store inventories change sort of every couple of missions. You can reset the store as well. You can pay some money to reset the inventory. Found like the gem, I never really found myself buying any gems from the store for upgrades. I found they just drop enough. You get loads of them. Maybe if you wanted a really specific one, if you were looking for, I really want a high quality lightning damage gem and the store had one, you might buy it. But other than that, I found that you know, the content of gems you get dropping from enemies was plenty to keep your weapons upgraded. But every now and then the vendor will have a new weapon which might be interesting for you, depending on what it is. And like I say, you talk to NPCs there, your story NPCs are there, and they're usually the same ones that give you a side quest as well. And so then, yeah, you go to the map, and each current active mission you've got will be pinned on the map, and you just click on there and you get teleported, and then you can start hacking your way through the enemies in the environment. So yeah, the combat in general was fun, satisfying, and extremely gory, interspersed with Lo Wang's wisecracks and voice lines. He also has like not monologue, he has a dialogue with somebody in his head. I'm not going to give away who, or well, it becomes fairly apparent quite early on in the game, but he has someone in his head, and they often have some funny conversations. I kind of preferred the melee combat. I found that sort of the more interesting and the more satisfying. The melee weapons were like the more interesting, I felt. So I sort of, and I had like an upgrade that gave me like 30% melee damage and minus 20% like gun damage. So I equipped that and decided to go mostly all in on the melee. I had a couple of guns equipped just to deal with things that you couldn't get close to, or there was a couple of enemies that were just like floating like orbs that were a bit tricky. They were fast and maneuverable, and it's a bit tricky to stay on top of them to melee them, so I kind of just shot them. But yeah, I felt the melee combat was more fun and more interesting, and the ammo could be an issue as well. Ammo drops, and you find ammo about. If you are just shooting, if you try not to use melee weapons at all, ammo can become an issue. You can run out of ammo with every different type of ammo, your shotgun ammo, your machine gun ammo, whatever, and you find yourself having to melee eventually anyway. It's just how I felt, but I'm sure you could just go through it just preferring guns if you wanted to. So I finished there the main story, doing the main story and side quests. Still plenty to do at the end of it, lots of replay potential. You can play through the whole story again, keeping the upgrades and weapons and that you've got, but basically starting again from the beginning. There's free roam, like some of the missions you complete, you can free roam the area afterwards, just killing enemies. So there's a fair bit to do even after you finished the main story. I did the main story and the side quests. Yeah, lots of replay potential. But yeah, the main story's solid enough if you're just going to play through it once and then put the game to one side. So all in all, yeah, it was a fun, humorous, not too taxing hack and slash stroke first person shooter, and yeah, I quite liked it. So that was Shadow Warrior 2. Thanks for watching.